Does the Feast of Tabernacles point to the millennial kingdom?
Welcome to this prophetic perspective. We're going to be talking about the Feast of Sukkot, one that some Americans are not very familiar with. It's very Jewish in its flavor, and yet it is the last and perhaps the most joyous feast of all in terms of celebrating the end of a harvest year. Tell us a little bit about the Feast of Sukkot, Richard.
Well, in the Feast of Sukkot, actually God wants all the Jewish people to build a sukkah.
A sukkah, which is a what?
Temporary shelter. And that's where Sukkot comes in because that's the plural form for sukkah. And so they're to take of the natural trees and branches and things like that of the land of Israel, and then they're to build these sukkahs anywhere and everywhere all around Israel. Now, even in the first century, they would actually go to Jerusalem and outside the city, out in the valleys, wherever. Many people would just build them wherever they could. But the ones that got there first, they got to go into the Temple Mount area and build their sukkahs there, which is kind of cool.
So they're kind of like tents? What do they look like exactly?
Well, nowadays we build them out of PVC pipe and wood, and so they are kind of like tents. Yeah, you can make a tent, but a structure. I have 4 poles, and then we have a top that goes on top of a flat top. So
what is this pointing back to? Why did the Lord ordain this feast in the Old Testament?
Well, the Jewish people were in the desert for 40 years, right? Walking and circling and in judgment, of course, unfortunately. And God wanted to remind them that God was with us. Okay, God is with us. And that He took care of all their needs while they were in the deserts. They had water, they had manna, they had temporary shelters. Okay. So God took care of all the physical needs, and He wanted to remind them of that.
And sometimes people refer to it as the Feast of Booths, and that's another word or name for this feast.
Now, in the NASB, it's actually called the Feast of Booths. And I have a funny little story about that. Yeah. I was teaching in a Baptist church many, many years ago. This is almost 30 years ago now. And I was talking about the Feast of Booths and Feast of Booths this and Feast of Booths that. And then after the service, one of the ladies came up to me. She says, "I can't believe Jewish people are boozers." And I said, "What? No. You got to be kidding me. What are you talking about?" She says, "Yeah, the Feast of Booze." She thought I was saying booze instead of booths.
No wonder you're so joyful during that particular feast, Richard, the 7-day Feast of Booze.
So I learned early on in our ministry, I call it the Feast of Tabernacles.
All right.
I stay away from booze.
So it's also not just pointing backward, but this feast is pointing forward. And as a prophetic perspective, what is the Feast of Tabernacles pointing forward to?
Well, after Jesus comes back, He's going to set up the kingdom. And then we will know for sure, and everybody around the world will know, God is with us. And so we will worship Him as Lord, as King of the Jews, in His temple, on His throne, in the land of Israel. He's going to build the temple. He's going to then, of course, live in the temple. That's where Jesus will sit probably for the whole 1,000 years. We don't know if He'll come out or not. Maybe He will. And He's going to teach from the temple as well, as Isaiah chapter 2 tells us to.
It's almost fulfilling His own name of Emmanuel, God with us.
And so as all the nations then come to visit Jerusalem each year and worship the Lord and see Jesus face to face, will they all dwell in these little tents and things around and celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles?
Of course. Okay. Why not?
So even as Gentiles in the millennial kingdom will celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles.
Everybody will be traveling to Israel. And of course, the Gentiles will be living all around the world again. They'll be repopulating. So it's going to take some time for that to happen. And then they'll be traveling to, especially on that feast, to be able to worship God. I think they're going to be required to travel to all the feasts, at least the top 3.
Interesting. And so what are some of the things that how Jewish people celebrate? What are some of the ceremonies that come with the Feast of Tabernacles?
Well, we have a service. And of course, we have lots of food that are involved in that as well. So, but services and prayers and blessings unto the Lord and just worshiping Him.
And there's lights involved, right?
Well, back in the temple, yes, we had 2 processionals that happened each and every day. There was a water processional and then there was a light processional. So in the show, we talked about the water processional, but now I want to talk about the light processional.
Okay. And as a matter of fact, if you haven't already gone to our Christ in Prophecy episode, we would encourage you. All of our feast episodes talking about the Feast of Israel, the Feast of the Lord, are available on our website, on our YouTube channel.
And we'll put the link below this video so
we certainly will.
Right to it.
Lots more information, but tell us about this processional of lights.
All right. So let's go to John chapter 8. We're going to look at verse 1 and 2. And then we're going to go to verse 12. Now, we already talked about the water processional in chapter 7, verse 37 and 39. So you go to the show, you can listen about that. But now we have to understand, though, that that water procession was on the Hoshana Rabbah day. That's the great day of the feast. It's the seventh day. Okay, the seventh day was the most joyous of days for the feast. Then we understand chapter 8, verse 1. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Okay, and early in the morning, so it's next day. It's the 8th day of the feast, but it's early in the morning. He came again into the temple, and all the people were coming to him. He sat down, he began to teach them. And so what is happening in the temple at that morning? Well, every night during the feast, they light the gigantic menorahs outside in the court of the women. There are 4 gigantic menorahs, and I think even here at the studio, I saw pictures and I saw renditions. There's 4, and they're gigantic. They're like 75 feet tall. They're golden. They have 4 huge bowls on them, big bowls, where they put olive oil in, and you light them up. And so the idea here is at nighttime, they do this. At nighttime, anybody who's outside of the city of Jerusalem, stuck outside in the desert, even up to 20, 30 miles away, they'd be able to see the light. And the light, of course, represents the light of God. And so there's Jerusalem. That's where God is. That's where the temple is. And during tabernacles, you have the light of God shining bright. Shining bright. So come out of the darkness, which is representative of what?
Of the world.
Of the world.
Sin, wickedness.
Evil, no salvation. Come into the light. Come into the salvation. Come into Jesus, really, for now.
So why did the Lord give the Jewish people these feasts and all this imagery to point to him? I mean, what was the purpose? I assume there's more than one purpose.
Well, to teach the people.
Okay.
To keep them focused
like
on
an
God.
object lesson.
It'll
help you remember it. Yeah.
And Jesus is going to build on that, I think, in this very next verse, probably, of that particular processional, right?
Yeah, in verse 12. We're going to see this now. Again, therefore, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in the darkness, but shall have the light of life. What is happening in the morning time with those candelabras? The sun is rising, and that light, if they allow the light to continue, which a lot of the times they put it out, but if they're continuing, that light is not going to shine bright at all because the sun's coming up. So as that light is diminishing, Jesus says, I am the light. I am the light of the world. I am the representation here of the light of God.
And it actually points to the eternal state where in the New Jerusalem, God is the light that lights the entire city. Huh.
Yes. You know, I think it's important that we point out too, on the Feast of Tabernacles, these are temporary dwellings, a tent, if you will, a lean-to, and that harkens to the fact that all of us live in temporary dwellings. This is a temporary existence right here and now. But Jesus is preparing a place for us that is eternal. If we put our trust in Him, He will give us a glorified body that will never decay, never wear down, never get sore and achy. And so if you want to trade in this temporary dwelling for one that will last forever, you have to put your trust in Jesus Christ.
He's the only way.
He is the only way. Folks, we hope that you will watch the rest of our programs on the Feast of Israel, but we hope that you already have put your trust in the one who says, I have gone to prepare a place for you if you just trust in me. The only way, the truth, and the life that leads to the Father.